Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold viewport of his patrol ship, watching the distant stars of the Rigel sector shimmer in the darkness. 3 years of routine patrols had made this job boring, but Earth Defense Command needed eyes and ears this far from home. The frontier was quiet these days, maybe too quiet. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on sensors," called out Lieutenant Mike Davis from the navigation station. His young face showed concern as he stared at his screen. "3 ships moving fast, coming right at us." Jake moved to the sensor station and looked at the readings. The ships were big, much bigger than his small patrol vessel. They moved with purpose, not like traders or explorers. "Something was wrong. Can you identify them?" Jake asked, his hand moving to the communication controls. "Negative, sir. The computer doesn't recognize the design. They're not in any of our databases." Jake felt his stomach drop. Unknown ships in this part of space usually meant trouble. He had heard rumors about alien raiders hitting human settlements on the outer worlds, but Command said those were just stories. Now he wasn't so sure. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Ship Phoenix. You are entering human space. Please identify yourselves." The response came quickly, but not through their communication system. Instead, bright energy beams lanced out from the approaching ships, striking the Phoenix's hull. The small ship shook violently as Jake was thrown against his chair. "Shields down to 60%, Mike shouted over the alarms. "Hull breach in Section 3. We're losing atmosphere." Jake grabbed the ship's controls and pushed the engines to maximum power. The Phoenix wasn't built for fighting, just for watching and reporting. Against 3 heavy ships, they had no chance in a straight fight. "Get us out of here," Jake said, trying to plot a course back to the nearest human base. But the alien ships were faster. They surrounded the Phoenix, cutting off every escape route. Another barrage of energy weapons struck their ship. This time the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. The smell of burned electronics filled the air. "Engines are dead," Mike reported, his voice shaking. "Life support is failing. We've got maybe 10 minutes of air left." Jake looked at the approaching ships on his screen. They were sleek and dangerous looking, covered in armor plating and weapon systems. These weren't traders or explorers. "These were warships. Send a distress signal," Jake ordered. "Full power, all frequencies. Let Command know what happened here." Mike's fingers flew over his controls, but then he stopped. "Sir, they're jamming us. Nothing is getting through." The largest of the 3 alien ships moved closer to the Phoenix. Jake could see details now through the viewport. The hull was dark green with red markings. Strange symbols covered the sides, and rows of weapon ports lined the ship like teeth in a mouth. A new voice came through their speakers, speaking in accented but clear English. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. Power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Jake looked at Mike. The young officer's eyes were wide with fear, but he was still at his post. "Good man, Captain, what do we do?" Mike asked quietly. Jake knew they had 2 choices. Fight and die quickly, or surrender and maybe live long enough to escape later. He had read reports about what happened to humans who were captured by unknown alien species. Most of them were never seen again, but alive was better than dead. "Power down all systems," Jake said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "We surrender." The alien ship attached itself to the Phoenix with a loud clang. Jake could hear cutting tools working on their outer hull. Within minutes, the airlock door exploded inward and armored figures rushed into the ship. The aliens were tall, maybe 7 feet, with green-scaled skin and yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their faces were long and narrow, with sharp teeth visible when they spoke. "Humans," one of them said, the word dripping with disgust. "Weak creatures from a weak world." They grabbed Jake and Mike roughly, binding their hands with metal restraints that were too tight. The alien who seemed to be in charge looked Jake up and down like he was examining a piece of meat. "I am Commander Vektash of the Valthari Empire," the alien said. "You are now property of the Empire. You will serve until you die." Jake tried to speak, but one of the guards hit him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. "Take them to the holding cells," Vektash ordered. "Admiral Korath will want to see what prizes we have caught today." They dragged Jake and Mike through corridors filled with more aliens. The ship was huge inside, with high ceilings and walls covered in the same strange symbols Jake had seen on the hull. Other humans were being marched along the corridors, all with the same metal restraints and terrified expressions. The holding cell was small and dark, with barely enough room for a dozen people. Jake was thrown inside with Mike and several other humans he didn't recognize. The door slammed shut with a sound like thunder. "Where do you think they're taking us?" Mike whispered in the darkness. Jake didn't answer right away. He was thinking about the alien's words. Property of the Empire. Serve until you die. It sounded like slavery, but worse. An older man in the corner of the cell spoke up. His voice was rough and tired. "Name's Marcus Webb. I've been on this ship for 3 months now. They're taking us to Drakmor Prime, the capital world of the Valthari Empire." "What do they want with us?" Jake asked. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Entertainment. They throw us into fighting pits for sport. Most humans don't last more than one fight. We're considered the weakest species in the galaxy." Jake felt cold fear creep up his spine. He had always thought humans were tough, that Earth's people could handle anything, but apparently the rest of the galaxy saw things differently. "How many humans have survived the fights?" Jake asked. "Not many," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe 1 in 50 makes it past the first match. The aliens bet on how quickly we'll die." Jake clenched his fists, feeling anger burn in his chest alongside the fear. These aliens had made a mistake. They saw humans as weak prey, good only for entertainment. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace, carrying them toward an unknown fate. But Jake Morrison wasn't going to die quietly in some alien fighting pit. He was going to show these Valthari exactly what humans were capable of when they were pushed too far. The hunt was about to begin, and Jake intended to be the hunter, not the prey. The transport ship landed on Drakmor Prime with a violent shake that threw Jake against the cell wall. Through the small window, he could see a world of dark red stone and twisted metal buildings reaching toward a green sky. This was the capital of the Valthari Empire, and it looked like a nightmare. Guards opened the cell doors and herded the prisoners out with electric prods. Jake helped Mike Davis walk, as the young officer had been sick during the journey. The air outside smelled of sulfur and burned metal. Strange sounds echoed from the distance, roars and screams that made Jake's skin crawl. "Welcome to paradise," Marcus Webb said with bitter humor as they were pushed down a ramp toward waiting vehicles. The city was massive. Buildings stretched as far as Jake could see, all built from the same dark red stone. Flying vehicles moved between the towers like angry insects. But what caught Jake's attention was the enormous structure in the center of the city. It was round and tall, with walls that seemed to glow in the strange light. "That's the Grand Colosseum," Marcus said, following Jake's gaze. "Where we're headed. Where most of us will die." They were loaded into armored vehicles that moved through the city streets. Jake watched the Valthari citizens going about their daily lives. The aliens were all tall and scaled, but he could see differences now. Some were darker green, others lighter. Some had more pronounced ridges along their heads. They moved with confidence, like predators who had never known fear. The vehicle stopped outside the Colosseum. Up close, the building was even more impressive and terrifying. The walls were covered in carvings of battles and death. Jake could hear the sound of crowds cheering from inside, and underneath that, the clash of weapons and screams of pain. Guards pushed them through a series of doors and corridors until they reached a large elevator. The ride down seemed to take forever. When the doors opened, Jake found himself in an underground world of cells, training areas, and preparation rooms. "Fresh meat," called out a voice from one of the cells. Jake turned to see a creature unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur with arms like tree trunks and claws that could tear through steel. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. "That's a Bruthari warrior," Marcus whispered. "They're bred for fighting. One of them can kill 10 normal soldiers without breaking a sweat." More voices called out as they passed other cells. Jake saw creatures that looked like they were made of living rock, others that moved so fast they were just blurs, and some with multiple arms covered in natural armor plates. All of them looked at the humans with either amusement or pity. "Look at the little pink things," laughed a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "So soft and weak. They'll break with the first hit." The guards stopped at a section of cells marked with human symbols. Most were empty, but a few contained other captured humans. They all had the look of people who had given up hope. Jake was pushed into a cell with Mike and Marcus. The space was small but clean, with basic sleeping areas and a water dispenser. Through the bars, he could see across to other cells holding different species. "How does this work?" Jake asked Marcus once the guards had left. Marcus sat heavily on one of the sleeping platforms. "Simple. They match fighters against each other for the entertainment of the crowd. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes groups. The crowd bets on who will win and how quickly the loser will die. What if you refuse to fight? They have ways to make you fight. Pain devices, threats against other prisoners. And if you still refuse, they just throw you to something that will kill you slowly while the crowd watches. Mike spoke up from where he was sitting in the corner. How long do most humans last? Most die in their first fight, Marcus said quietly. The few who survive get better food, better weapons, better cells. But eventually everyone dies. I've been here 3 months and I've seen maybe 20 humans come through. Only 3 of us are still alive. Jake felt anger building in his chest. These aliens saw humans as nothing more than entertainment, weak creatures to be thrown away for sport. But they didn't understand what they were dealing with. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain not through strength or speed, but through intelligence and determination. A new guard approached their cell. This one was different from the others, with more elaborate armor and scars covering his visible scales. He looked at Jake with interest. "You are the ship captain," he said in heavily accented English. "I am Overseer Vex. I run the Gladiator program." Jake stood up and faced the alien. "What do you want?" "You will fight tomorrow. Your first opponent will be Throck, a veteran Korgan berserker. He has killed 15 fighters in the past month." Vex smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "The crowd enjoys watching humans die quickly. You should not disappoint them." "What if I win?" Vex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans do not win against real warriors. You are weak, soft, slow. You exist only to die with some small amount of style." After the Overseer left, Jake sat quietly thinking. The aliens had made assumptions about humans based on their physical appearance. They saw small size and lack of natural weapons and assumed weakness. But they didn't understand that humans had other advantages. "Marcus," Jake said suddenly, "tell me everything you know about the fighters here. Their strengths, weaknesses, how they think." "Why?" "It won't help. Throck is a killing machine. Just tell me." For the next several hours, Marcus described the different species and their fighting styles. The Korgans were strong but predictable, always charging straight ahead. The Nexari were fast but overconfident in their speed. The Bruthari were powerful but had poor endurance. Jake listened carefully, filing away every detail. These aliens fought like animals, using instinct and natural ability, but humans fought with their minds. They adapted, learned, and found ways to turn enemy strengths into weaknesses. Late that night, as the others slept, Jake did something the aliens wouldn't expect. He began to exercise not for strength but for flexibility and speed. He practiced movements he remembered from his military training, focusing on balance and quick reactions. Tomorrow, Throck the Korgan berserker would expect to face a weak, frightened human who would die quickly for the crowd's entertainment. Instead, he would face something the arena had never seen before. A human who had no intention of dying. Jake smiled in the darkness. These aliens thought they were throwing him to the predators. They had no idea they had just introduced the ultimate predator into their carefully controlled environment. The arena awaited, but Jake Morrison was ready to hunt. The morning came too quickly. Guards opened Jake's cell and dragged him toward the preparation area. His heart pounded as he walked through corridors filled with the sounds of sharpening weapons and growling creatures. The smell of blood hung in the air like a warning. In the armory, Overseer Vex handed Jake a basic plasma blade and simple chest armor. The weapon was old and scratched, clearly the worst equipment they had. Vex smiled as he watched Jake examine the blade. "This is all humans deserve," Vex said. "Throck gets the premium weapons. The crowd expects a quick death, not a real fight." Jake nodded and said nothing. Let them think he was scared and beaten. It would make his victory more surprising. They led him through a tunnel that opened into blinding light. The arena was enormous, with thousands of Valthari spectators filling the seats. Their voices created a roar like thunder as Jake stepped onto the sand. He could see betting boards around the arena showing odds. His name had numbers so low they were almost invisible. Across the arena, gates opened and Throck emerged. The Korgan berserker was everything Marcus had described and worse. 9 feet tall, covered in natural armor plates, with forearms ending in claws like knives. His face was a nightmare of teeth and rage, and his eyes burned with bloodlust. The crowd cheered wildly as Throck raised his weapons, 2 massive battle axes that gleamed in the artificial sunlight. He beat his chest and roared, a sound that made Jake's bones vibrate. The berserker had fought in over 30 matches and never lost. "Fighters ready," announced the arena master, his voice booming through speakers. "Let the blood flow." Throck charged immediately, just as Marcus had predicted. The berserker moved in a straight line, axes swinging in wide arcs designed to cut Jake in half. But Jake was already moving, rolling to the side as the huge alien thundered past. The crowd laughed at what they saw as cowardly running. But Jake wasn't running, he was learning. Throck was strong and fast, but he was also predictable. The berserker fought with pure instinct, no strategy or planning. Throck turned and charged again, roaring in frustration. This time Jake waited until the last second before dropping to the ground and rolling between the alien's legs. His plasma blade sliced across the back of Throck's ankle, cutting through a gap in the natural armor. The berserker stumbled but didn't fall. Green blood leaked from the wound as he spun around, now more cautious. The crowd had gone quiet, confused by what they were seeing. "Impossible," Jake heard someone shout from the stands. The human actually heard him. Throck was learning too, but not fast enough. He tried a different approach, using all four arms to attack from multiple angles. But Jake had spent years studying combat tactics. He watched the berserker's shoulders, reading the telegraphed movements before the attacks came. Duck under the high swing, step back from the low cut, roll left to avoid the overhead strike. Jake moved like water, flowing around Throck's attacks while delivering small cuts whenever he found an opening. The berserker was getting frustrated, and frustrated fighters made mistakes. The big mistake came when Throck overcommitted to a massive swing that would have cut Jake in 3 pieces. But Jake wasn't there anymore. He had dropped to the sand and swept his leg across the back of Throck's injured ankle. The berserker crashed to the ground, his weapons flying from his hands. Jake was on him instantly, plasma blade at Throck's throat. The arena fell completely silent. Even the sounds from the other preparation areas seemed to stop. "Yield," Jake said quietly, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Throck's eyes went wide with shock and something Jake had never expected to see in a berserker. "Respect." "I yield," the alien said, his voice rough with pain and surprise. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some Valthari were cheering, others were screaming in anger. Money was changing hands rapidly as the impossible had happened. A human had defeated a veteran gladiator. Overseer Vex rushed onto the arena floor, his face twisted with disbelief. "How did you do this?" he demanded. Jake stood slowly, still holding his weapon. "You made a mistake," he said calmly. "You thought humans were weak because we're small. But we didn't survive on our world by being strong. We survived by being smart." Back in the holding area, the other fighters looked at Jake differently. The Bruthari warrior who had mocked him the day before now watched him with careful attention. The rock creatures whispered among themselves in their grinding language. Marcus Webb grabbed Jake's arm as he returned to their cell. "That was incredible. But you've made yourself a target now. They'll give you harder opponents." "Good," Jake said. "I want them to keep underestimating us." Over the next few days, Jake learned more about the arena's structure. There were different levels of fighters, from newcomers like himself to champions who lived in luxury between fights. Winners got better food, equipment, and living conditions, but more importantly, they got access to different parts of the facility. Jake's second opponent was announced 3 days later. Riley Thompson, another human who had been captured from a mining station on the frontier. Riley had survived 4 fights over the past 2 months, making him one of the most successful human gladiators ever. The night before the fight, Jake found a way to speak with Riley privately during the evening meal period. "They want us to kill each other," Jake whispered, "but we don't have to play their game." Riley was a big man with scars from his previous fights. He looked at Jake suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" "We can make it look like a real fight, but work together. Learn about this place, find weaknesses. There are other humans here. We should be helping each other, not entertaining these aliens with our deaths." Riley thought for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you have in mind?" The fight between Jake and Riley became a carefully choreographed performance. To the crowd, it looked like 2 humans battling desperately for survival. In reality, they were sharing information, coordinating movements, and studying the arena's security systems. Jake allowed Riley to land several hits that looked serious, but weren't dangerous. Riley fought with controlled aggression that appeared genuine. When Jake finally defeated Riley, it was by mutual agreement. Riley fell dramatically but remained conscious. "The human captain wins again," announced the arena master, but his voice held less enthusiasm than before. The crowd was starting to expect human victories, which made them less entertaining. In the medical area afterward, Jake helped treat Riley's staged wounds while they continued their conversation. "There are 6 other humans in different cell blocks," Riley whispered, "including Tom Bradley, who used to be a military strategist before he got captured." Jake smiled. The aliens thought they were isolating dangerous individuals by spreading humans throughout the facility. Instead, they had created a network of potential allies with different skills and knowledge. "Get word to the others," Jake said. "Tell them to watch and learn. We're not here to die for their entertainment. We're here to show them what happens when you corner the most dangerous predator in the galaxy." Riley grinned through his fake injuries. "What happens?" "The predator starts hunting back." 2 weeks later, Jake had become something of a celebrity in the arena. His winning streak had reached 7 fights, an almost impossible record for a human. The Valthari crowds now came specifically to watch the strange little warrior who fought with his mind instead of his strength. But Jake's real victory was happening behind the scenes. Through Riley Thompson and careful planning, he had made contact with every human in the facility. There were 12 of them total, each with different skills that could help in an escape attempt. Tom Bradley was the prize. The former Earth military strategist had been captured during a raid on a research station. He had survived 3 fights by using tactics similar to Jake's, focusing on strategy over strength. When they finally met during a training session, Tom immediately understood what Jake was trying to accomplish. "You're building a resistance network," Tom said quietly as they practiced with training weapons. "Smart. These aliens see us as individuals, not as a group species." "Exactly," Jake replied, blocking Tom's practice sword with his own. "They put us in different cell blocks to keep us isolated. But humans work better together than apart." Tom smiled grimly. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me understand this place. Security patterns, guard rotations, weak points. And help me train the others. Not everyone here is a soldier." Over the next few days, Tom shared everything he had learned about the facility. The Grand Coliseum was built like a fortress, with multiple levels of security and hundreds of guards. But it was designed to keep prisoners in, not to stop a coordinated assault from within. Jake also made contact with Lisa Parker, a former engineer who had been captured with a scientific expedition. She was small and quiet, but her knowledge of technology was invaluable. Lisa had been studying the arena's systems during her time there, looking for weaknesses. "The power grid has a central control point," she told Jake during a carefully arranged meeting in the medical bay. "If someone could get there with the right tools, they could shut down all the containment systems at once." "What kind of tools?" Jake asked. Lisa showed him a small device she had been building from scavenged parts. "Electromagnetic pulse generator. Crude, but it should work if I can get close enough to the main power core." The network grew stronger each day. David Chen was a former military medic who kept the human fighters healthy and helped them recover faster from their battles. He also had detailed knowledge of alien biology from treating fighters of different species. "Each species has predictable weak points," David explained during one of their secret meetings. "The Korgans have poor circulation in their lower legs. The Nexari have hollow bones that break easily if you hit them right. The Bruthari overheat quickly in prolonged fights." Jake filed away every piece of information. The aliens saw humans as weak individuals, but they were building something the arena had never seen before. A coordinated team with complementary skills and shared goals. His next major fight was announced with great fanfare. Veltar, the undefeated Nexari champion, had never lost a match in over 50 battles. The Nexari were fast, faster than any species in the known galaxy. Veltar moved like lightning and struck like a snake, but Jake now had advantages the alien couldn't imagine. Tom had analyzed hours of footage from Veltar's previous fights, identifying patterns in his movement. Lisa had modified Jake's equipment with small improvements that wouldn't be noticed by the guards. David had provided detailed information about Nexari physiology. The night before the fight, Jake met with his entire network during a carefully orchestrated distraction. Riley had started a fight with a Korgan in the main exercise area, drawing most of the guards away from the cell blocks. "This is our biggest test," Jake told the gathered humans. "If I can beat Veltar, it proves that humans can defeat anyone in this place. It will also get me access to the upper levels where the real planning can begin. What if you lose? Asked Sarah Mitchell, a pilot who had been captured 2 months earlier. I won't, Jake said simply. Because I'm not fighting him alone. I'm fighting with all of your knowledge, all of your skills. That's something these aliens will never understand. The day of the fight, the arena was packed beyond capacity. Valthari nobles had come from across the Empire to watch the undefeated champion face the strange human warrior. The betting was intense, with most money still going against Jake despite his winning streak. Veltar entered the arena like a living shadow. The Nexari moved so fast that Jake could barely track him with his eyes. The alien carried twin curved blades that seemed to dance in his hands. His dark skin was covered in ritual scars, and his silver eyes held the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The human will die quickly, Veltar said in perfect English, his voice like silk over steel. I have studied your previous fights. You are clever for a primitive, but cleverness cannot match true speed. Jake said nothing. Let the alien talk. Tom's analysis had shown that Veltar liked to intimidate opponents with words before killing them quickly. But the champion had only fought against individuals, never against a coordinated intelligence network. The fight began with Veltar moving faster than Jake thought possible. The Nexari seemed to teleport around the arena, striking from impossible angles. But Jake wasn't trying to match his speed. Instead, he was following Tom's careful analysis of movement patterns. Veltar always attacked from the left after a feint to the right. He always followed a high strike with a low one. He always moved in the same curved patterns because they were the most efficient for his body type. Jake began to anticipate the attacks instead of reacting to them. When Veltar appeared on his left, Jake was already moving right. When the alien struck high, Jake was already ducking low. The champion's confidence slowly turned to frustration as his attacks missed their target. Impossible, Veltar hissed after a particularly complex combination failed to connect. You are too slow to avoid me. I'm not avoiding you, Jake said calmly. I'm predicting you. The turning point came when Jake deliberately left himself open for what looked like an easy kill. Veltar took the bait, moving in for a finishing strike that would pierce Jake's heart. But Jake had studied David's anatomical notes. He knew exactly where the Nexari's hollow bones were weakest. As Veltar struck, Jake moved slightly to the side and brought his weapon up in a precise arc. The plasma blade connected with the Nexari's wrist at exactly the right angle and force. The hollow bone snapped like a dry stick. Veltar screamed and dropped one of his weapons. His supernatural speed meant nothing with a broken wrist that sent pain shooting through his entire nervous system. Jake pressed his advantage, using techniques Tom had developed specifically for fighting injured but dangerous opponents. Within minutes, the undefeated champion was on the ground, both weapons lost with Jake's blade at his throat. The arena fell silent once again. Then slowly a few Velthari began to cheer, not because they liked humans, but because they had witnessed something unprecedented, a new kind of fighter who won through intelligence and preparation instead of natural gifts. Overseer Vex approached Jake with a mixture of respect and fear in his eyes. You have done something that should not be possible, he said. Veltar has been champion for 3 years, and now a human has beaten him, Jake replied. Maybe it's time you stopped underestimating my species. That night, in his upgraded cell that came with his new status, Jake smiled as he thought about what came next. The victory over Veltar had given him access to better facilities, more freedom of movement, and contact with higher-level personnel. The hunt was just beginning, and the pack was ready to show these aliens what happened when they cornered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Jake's reputation as the human predator had spread beyond the arena walls. Valthari nobles from distant worlds came to see the impossible warrior, who defeated champions through cunning instead of strength. The betting houses had stopped taking bets against him, and other species began requesting transfers to different facilities to avoid facing him. But Jake had bigger plans than just winning fights. His victory over Veltar had earned him a private cell in the champion's quarters, with access to better training facilities and more freedom of movement. More importantly, it gave him contact with arena personnel who knew the facility's deepest secrets. 3 weeks after the Veltar fight, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Korath himself, the Valthari fleet commander who had ordered his capture, came to see the human who had become a legend. You are not what we expected, Korath said, studying Jake through the reinforced bars of his cell. Our reports indicated that humans were weak, cowardly prey species. Yet you have killed or defeated some of our finest warriors. Your reports were wrong, Jake replied calmly. You judged us by our size and assumed we were helpless. That was your first mistake. Korath's eyes narrowed. What was our second mistake? Keeping us alive long enough to learn about you. The Admiral laughed, but there was unease in the sound. You speak as if you expect to leave this place. No gladiator has ever escaped from Drakmor Prime. No human gladiator has ever had a reason to escape before, Jake said. You've given us one. After Korath left, Jake activated the network he had spent weeks building. Through carefully passed messages and coded conversations, he contacted every human in the facility. The plan he had been developing was ready to move to the next phase. Lisa Parker had completed her electromagnetic pulse device using parts scavenged from training equipment and broken weapons. It was crude but powerful enough to disable the facility's main power grid for several minutes. That would be enough time to free the other prisoners and reach the hangar bay. Tom Bradley had mapped out guard rotations and identified the weakest points in the security system. The guards changed shifts at midnight, creating a 10-minute window when certain areas were only lightly protected. The route to the power core would be dangerous but possible. David Chen had been treating fighters from dozens of different species, learning about their strengths and weaknesses. More importantly, he had been quietly poisoning key guards with slow-acting toxins that would weaken them during the escape attempt. But Jake needed one more element to make the plan work. He needed to position himself near the facility's central power core during the most chaotic moment possible. That meant facing the arena's ultimate challenge. Overseer Vex announced Jake's next opponent with tremendous fanfare. Gromnash the Destroyer, a legendary Bruthari warrior who had never been defeated in over 100 battles. The fight would be broadcast across the Valthari Empire as the ultimate test of the human champion. Gromnash is different from the others, Marcus Webb warned Jake during a training session. He's not just strong, he's intelligent. He's beaten fighters who used strategy against him before. Perfect, Jake replied, much to Marcus's confusion. The bigger the spectacle, the better it works for our purposes. Jake spent the next week studying everything he could learn about Gromnash. The Bruthari warrior was indeed different. Unlike other fighters who relied on instinct and natural ability, Gromnash adapted his tactics based on his opponents. He had defeated speed fighters by being patient, defeated strategy fighters by being unpredictable, but Gromnash had never faced a human who wasn't really trying to win the fight. The night before the battle, Jake met with his network one final time. Every human in the facility had a role to play in the escape attempt. Remember, the goal isn't to win fights or prove we're tough, Jake told them. The goal is to get home and warn Earth what's coming. These aliens see humans as prey now, but they won't for much longer. Riley Thompson had been assigned to create distractions in the lower levels, drawing guards away from critical areas. Sarah Mitchell and 2 other humans would secure vehicles in the hangar bay. Tom Bradley would coordinate the timing to ensure everyone reached their positions simultaneously. What about you? Lisa asked. How do you get from the arena floor to the power core? Jake smiled grimly. Leave that to me. Just be ready when the lights go out. The day of the fight, the arena was more crowded than anyone had ever seen. Valthari from across the Empire filled every seat, and viewing screens showed the battle to billions more on distant worlds. The betting was enormous, with most money going to Gromnash despite Jake's impressive record. Gromnash entered the arena like an earthquake given form. The Bruthari warrior stood nearly 10 feet tall with muscles like steel cables and skin that looked like living armor. His weapons were simple but devastating. A massive warhammer that could crush stone and a shield that had never been pierced. Human, Gromnash said in a voice like grinding boulders. I have studied your fighting style. You rely on prediction and misdirection. These tactics will not work against me. We'll see, Jake replied. But his mind was already on the real battle that would begin soon. The fight started with Gromnash moving more carefully than Jake had expected. The Bruthari warrior had clearly learned from watching the defeats of Thrak and Veltar. He didn't charge blindly or rely on overwhelming attacks. Instead, he fought with patience and intelligence. For 20 minutes, Jake and Gromnash circled each other, trading careful strikes and testing defenses. The crowd grew restless, expecting either a quick human victory or a brutal alien domination. Instead, they were watching a chess match played with weapons, but Jake wasn't trying to defeat Gromnash. He was maneuvering the fight toward a specific location in the arena. Near the center of the floor was a maintenance hatch that led directly to the power core chamber. Lisa's device needed to be placed within 50 feet of the main generator to work properly. As the fight continued, Jake gradually led Gromnash toward the target area. The Bruthari warrior was too focused on combat tactics to notice the subtle positioning. When they finally reached the right spot, Jake made his move. Instead of attacking Gromnash, Jake dove for the maintenance hatch and ripped it open with his plasma blade. The crowd gasped as he disappeared into the hole, leaving a confused Bruthari warrior standing alone in the arena. "Security alert," blared the arena's speakers. "Gladiator has left the combat area. All units respond." But Jake was already racing through maintenance tunnels that Tom had mapped weeks earlier. Behind him, he could hear guards shouting and alarms sounding. The facility was going into lockdown, but it was too late. He reached the power core chamber just as Lisa had calculated. The massive generator hummed with energy, providing power to every system in the facility. Jake pulled out the electromagnetic pulse device and activated it according to Lisa's instructions. The explosion of electromagnetic energy was invisible, but devastating. Every light in the facility went out simultaneously. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, but the containment systems remained offline. Throughout the prison levels, cell doors swung open as their electronic locks failed. Confused alien prisoners emerged into corridors lit only by dim emergency lighting. But the humans were ready. Jake fought his way back toward the surface as his network executed their escape plan with military precision. Guards who had been weakened by David's slow-acting poisons found themselves facing desperate humans who fought with coordinated tactics and shared intelligence. By the time Jake reached the main arena level, the facility was in complete chaos. Freed prisoners of all species were fighting each other and the guards. In the confusion, 12 humans moved through the facility like a coordinated strike team, heading for their predetermined rally point. Overseer Vex appeared in front of Jake as he reached the arena floor, flanked by a dozen heavily armed guards. "You have doomed yourself, human. Even if you escape this facility, you will never leave this world." Jake smiled coldly. "You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? We're not just escaping. We're going home to tell our people what happened here, and humans don't forget when someone hurts their own." The battle for the hangar bay was about to begin, and Jake Morrison was ready to show the Valthari Empire what happened when they made humans their prey. The battle through the facility's corridors was unlike anything the Valthari had ever experienced. They were used to individual fighters, isolated prisoners who could be overwhelmed by superior numbers and equipment. They had never faced a coordinated human military unit operating behind enemy lines. Jake moved through the chaos like he was born for it. Years of combat training and weeks of careful planning had prepared him for this moment. Behind him, the other humans followed in perfect formation, each knowing their role and executing it flawlessly. Tom Bradley coordinated their movements with hand signals, directing the team around guard patrols and through the least defended routes. Lisa Parker had memorized the facility's layout from maintenance records, guiding them through service corridors that bypassed the main security checkpoints. David Chen treated wounded team members on the move, using supplies taken from defeated guards to keep everyone fighting effectively. Riley Thompson and Sarah Mitchell cleared obstacles with brutal efficiency, their gladiatorial experience making them deadly in close combat. The Valthari guards, despite their superior weapons and armor, found themselves constantly outmaneuvered. Every time they set up an ambush, the humans seemed to know exactly where it was. Every time they tried to coordinate a response, their communications were jammed by Lisa's improvised devices. How are they doing this? Jake heard one guard shout to another as the human team slipped past their position through a ventilation shaft. "They're just primitive prey animals," Jake smiled grimly. That attitude was exactly why the escape was working. The aliens still couldn't accept that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. The team reached the hangar bay to find it heavily defended. Dozens of guards had taken positions around the entrance with heavy weapons and energy barriers blocking every approach. Sarah Mitchell, their pilot, pointed toward a sleek Valthari transport ship near the center of the bay. "That one," she whispered. "Fast, long range, and I can fly it. How do we get past all those guards?" Marcus Webb asked. Jake studied the defensive positions for a moment, then smiled. "We don't go past them. We go through them. The assault on the hangar bay began with Lisa's remaining electromagnetic devices, disrupting the guards' communications and targeting systems. In the confusion that followed, 12 humans attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. But this wasn't the chaotic charge the Valthari expected. Instead, it was a precisely coordinated military operation. Tom Bradley had divided the team into 3 groups, each with a specific objective and timeline. They moved like they had trained together for years instead of weeks. Jake's group hit the main entrance while Riley's team attacked from the service tunnels. Sarah's group used maintenance access to reach the transport ship directly. The guards, expecting individual fighters or panicked escapees, were completely unprepared for professional military tactics. The battle was fierce but brief. Valthari warriors were individually stronger and better equipped than humans, but they had no experience fighting as a coordinated unit. They got in each other's way, hesitated when they should have acted, and acted when they should have coordinated. Within minutes, the hangar bay was under human control. Bodies of alien guards littered the floor, and the surviving defenders had retreated to more defensible positions deeper in the facility. Transport secured, Sarah called out from the pilot's seat. "Engines warming up, we need to go now." But as the team moved toward the ship, Overseer Vex appeared with a full company of elite guards. These weren't the regular facility security. They were Imperial Marines, heavily armored and armed with the most advanced weapons the Valthari military possessed. "You will not escape," Vex snarled, his scaled face twisted with rage. "I will see you all dead before I let primitive humans embarrass the Empire." "You already lost," Jake replied calmly. "You just don't know it yet." The final battle was everything Jake had trained for. Elite Valthari Marines against a desperate human team with nothing left to lose. The aliens had superior equipment and training, but the humans had something more valuable. They had a cause worth dying for. Jake faced Vex in single combat while his team held off the Marines. The Overseer was skilled and experienced, but he was fighting with anger instead of intelligence. Jake remained calm, using every lesson he had learned in the arena to stay alive. "You think you have won something?" Vex hissed as their weapons clashed. "But even if you escape, humanity is still weak. The Empire will crush your pathetic species when we decide you are worth the effort." "That's where you're wrong," Jake replied, finding an opening in Vex's defenses. His plasma blade pierced the alien's armor, striking deep into his chest. "We were never weak. We were just patient." As Vex fell, the remaining Marines lost their coordination. Some tried to avenge their leader. Others attempted to retreat and regroup. In the chaos, the humans reached their transport ship and lifted off from the hangar bay. Sarah Mitchell proved her skills as a pilot, evading the defensive systems and breaking through the facility's energy shields. Within minutes, they were in space and climbing toward the edge of the Drakmor system. "Pursuit ships launching," Tom reported from the sensor station. 12 fighters closing fast." "Let them come," Jake said, taking the co-pilot's seat. "They still think they're chasing prey." The chase through the Drakmor system was harrowing but brief. Sarah used every trick she knew, plus several improvised maneuvers that pushed the stolen transport to its limits. The Valthari pursuit ships were faster, but they flew like they were chasing a panicked refugee vessel. Instead, they found themselves facing a ship piloted by someone who understood both human innovation and alien technology. Sarah led them through an asteroid field where their superior speed became a disadvantage, then used the transport's superior shields to survive impacts that forced the pursuit ships to retreat. When they reached the edge of the system, Jake activated the ship's long-range communications array. The message he broadcast went out on all frequencies, ensuring that every Valthari listening post in the sector would receive it. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," he said, his voice carrying across the void. "For weeks you have held me and 11 other humans as slaves in your gladiatorial arenas. You treated us like animals for your entertainment. You assumed we were weak because we were different from you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You were wrong. We are not weak. We are not prey, and we do not forgive those who harm our own. This message goes out to the Valthari Empire, and any other species that thinks humanity is helpless. We are returning to Earth with everything we learned about your technology, your tactics, and your weaknesses." Another pause. "The hunt is over, and you were never the hunters." As the transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying 12 humans home with intelligence that would change the balance of power in the galaxy, Jake allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The aliens had tried to make humans into entertainment. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. They had created survivors with a mission. Back on Earth, when the story of the Drakmor escape spread through human space, the reaction was immediate and decisive. Humanity had been content to remain a minor species on the galactic stage, but the Valthari had made a critical error. They had shown humans exactly what needed to be done to earn respect in the galaxy. The species that aliens had dismissed as primitive prey was about to become the most feared predator in known space. And it all started with 12 humans who refused to die quietly in an alien arena. The dragons had thrown humans into their den expecting easy victims. Instead, they had awakened something that would hunt them across the stars.